Welcome back, everybody, and thanks for joining us for another episode of The Charlie Show. This week, we're going to sit down and build a fresh copter. I had built, not too long ago, a brand new 2450 kV build, and it is still resting in the bottom of a lake. So I want to build that again. I got a fresh G2 stack, some fresh 2450 Race Pro motors, and we're going to slap that all together on a brand new frame. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoy. All right, so first things first. Before I begin a build, I like to put the frame together, usually a couple times, to make sure I got all my right size screws and all that. This particular one is something that Travis, or Moke, designed. He's been working on his own frame, not really to sell, just for himself. When you start with the frame, I sand all the edges first, either with, I usually do it with a Dremel and some cheap diamond bits or the sanding drum, just to take those sharp edges off everything so it's not cutting the wire. And most importantly, in the battery slots, you got to get a nice smooth chamfer on the edge of those so you don't get your straps cut all the time. Some people like to glue the edges. They'll take some CA glue, some real thin CA, and run that along all the edges. I crash so much, I'm not too worried about that. So you get the frame built. I like to get the camera in there too so you don't get any surprises while you're putting your receiver in there. Try to make sure that you got room to put your receiver where you're going to want to, or you have some backup space. And then I'm going to end up using the TBS, what is this? Unify Pro 5.8 or 5G8 HV Race Edition. That's going to sit probably somewhere in the back right here with the antenna right along there. So before we get to all of that buttoning up, what I like to do is my pre-prep, get all my receiver wire, VTX harnesses, and motor wires all to length first. So we'll sit down and do all that now. XRotor stack, what is commonly called a stack, the speed control and the flight control, they plug into each other and they stack on top of each other. So it's been referred to as a stack. For the 6S stuff, look at that, 12 gauge wire, yeah, and then big honking power caps, hardware, and the oh so important instruction manuals with all the pinouts. I get emails, people asking me for the pinout of the flight controls, and they're in the instruction manual or online. They often want to know what all these unlabeled pins are for, and they're not for anything. There's a couple unlabeled pins on the bottom and on the top, and engineering has confirmed that those are not for usage. They're for programming, testing, fun stuff like that. So let's start with, I think, flight control is usually the easiest. Flight control is going to sit in here, USB on this side, your rail of wires back here. I'm probably thinking I want to put my receiver in the front like I've done in many other builds. So this guy's going to sit kind of up in here somewhere. My antenna tips are clear of the carbon and not in the way of too much else. So in that case, where's my receiver wire? That is not going to be long enough. I need a longer one of these because it needs to come from here all the way over there. Bummer. Long enough? I got a longer one, and I'm going to get it to come all the way back around. So I'm going to give it a little bit extra length because you can always twist them back up. Alright, so tin the receiver wires just a little bit, and then put these on the receiver, and that is almost all of it. Or, flight control rather. So for my receiver, I use whichever one's next to it, right there. It's RX TX1. RX is on the top. Then I got grounds and LEDs. Hold on, nope, I lied. It's gonna go on this side. I got ground, I got 3 volts, and I got RX3 right along that top row. So that's what I use for my spectrum stuff. Ground, power, signal. So that's that, nice and clean, little bit melted insulation. So what I'm going to do is touch those and slide the wire down in, just a fuzz. that does is just make sure that the insulation is flush or flat and we don't have like exposed wires on the top. And then if there is a little bit of wire sticking out like that, I use the little flush cutters and clean that off. Make sure you get those solder balls, those pieces out of there. Alright, so receiver wire installed, ground 3.3 volts for the Spectrum, and then the gray signal wire is on RX3, which is UR3, which we'll set up in the Betaflight later. So for this guy, there's only the plug harness for all the other stuff for the video side and the OSD. So I'm going to get the harness out, check out that pin out, and then wire that all up with my VTX harness. Alright, so for the VTX side, I have this sweet harness. It's going to go in here like this, and I like to plug it in to make sure I get the sequence right. So that it's got video in, video out, 10 volt ground, and then a UART 6 over here. It's got the TX and the RX. So these bottom guys are our UARTs. This is our video in on the very top. This is video out next to it. And then we got our power that comes to regulated power right here. So you could run this whole setup just to power your VTX if you wanted to, because this comes from a 1.5 amp regulator. So in that regard, we're going to take our Unify over here, and I like to plug the harnesses in so that I make sure I get it correct. And then they also are brilliant, and they put their pin out right on there. So I got my power, that's easy, and I got video in, and I got audio. So for TBS, you have this audio option, which is your smart audio for the changing channels. And that audio lead is going to get connected to one of my UARTs. And I want to say that it's going to be the TX size. We'll find out if I'm right or wrong. And then it's got power out, because this guy has its own regulator to power the camera as well, which I am a huge fan of. So I am going to cut this audio wire out, because I don't need it for the camera, and do that way up on this end. So I got this guy ready to go to one of those. And then power is easy, and then the video in comes from the camera side, so we're going to interrupt the camera harness, go into the in, and then the outside of that goes into the VTX harness. So my video wire is this yellow one. We're going to splice that guy. These don't need to be this long. They could be pretty darn short, because this is going to sit in the copter like this. VTX is going to sit right behind it. So I'm going to leave these. I mean, this is way, way, way longer than it needs to be, I'm pretty sure. This guy here. And then this, because that's the VTX side, is the video. And that is the out, which is this one. So we got video wire installed. Whew, that was a lot of work. Next up, we'll do the powers. We're going to use the onboard power just for the sake of using it, because I haven't used it yet, so we'll try it. So this side is power, this side's ground. I'm gonna make those guys, give or take, the same length. So, being very careful, ground is third up. We'll do ground first. And counting again, that the 10 volt is the third one from the top, so your power is right in the middle. It's kind of easy-ish to remember. So I got the video side sort of sorted out here. This side goes to the VTX, like so, and then what I'm going to do is just splice in a real simple 3-wire camera harness on the end of this that comes with the VTX for later. That way it can be nice and long. This is going to sit in the copter like this. This harness side will go back to the VTX. This is the smart audio that will connect over here to the UART. Get this guy out of our way for now. And then video in is going to go from the camera harness up to here where this power is going to come to. So this guy still needs to go back to one of our now. Smart audio is a control lead, so it should be TX. So TX for the smart audio is going to be T6, which is UART 6 on the transmitter side. This is the back of the copter. We're going to keep this guy right about here and keep him, give or take, the same length as everybody else. Little bonus lead. So the white wire gets connected to the white wire. So harness is nearly completed. That leaves us with this guy open and the video in open. So I gotta put my camera harness on this end and then we'll be all set. Then what I've determined will be the video in this guy. Alright, so that gives us a semi-clean-ish video lead off of there. And these guys, oh man, all my string tubing's coming off. That's already flight control as far as I can tell. So flight control is sort of ready. Speed control placement is going to be next. This guy's going to sit in like this, and it can't sit flat, so we're going to put some spacer nuts under there, but what I want to do is get power capacitor and all that stuff sorted out. So where is... I'm using the big power cap because bigger is always better, I say. So this guy is going to sit right down there. I'm going to use the handy dandy power cap holes to position that. So that guy is going to sit down in there. So let's do this. It looks like that's all going to sit in there nice and easy. Power cap's going to sit right about here with the VTX somewhere back there as well. Alright, that should work. Alright, so I got the power cap in there a little elevated, and that leaves a little bit of, oops, I don't want to lose these guys. That leaves a little bit of lead underneath, so I like to make sure that I flush cut those so I don't have anything chilling out down there causing problems. So just flush cut those, and that way speed control is pretty much ready to be wired in now. Positions will be like this. The slide through spacers on top, and then I'm going to bring my motor wires up to the side here. I don't like routing underneath like that, it just kind of gets in the way. And then the VTX is going to sit, plug on this side right there. Just going to double side tape it down, maybe put a zip tie around it for a little extra security, but this way the plug's back here. This guy can loop around to the standoff. Good to go. Alright, so now I got most of the small wiring done, I guess you'd say. I'm going to do the motors and check motor screw lengths, make sure they don't stick out too far. That guy is going to be just about right, so I'm just going to put one screw in for now so we can do motor wire lengths. when I do motor lengths, I like to have a little bit of wiggle room, so I usually lay my finger down in there and go up and over around. It's so that I get about that much gap, so that I got a little extra wire for working on stuff later. So that's my measurement. And that way, if you need to trim a little bit off later, it's not a big deal. You always have kind of some wiggle room to work with. I could even wire this around the back if I wanted to, but I don't want to. So I'm going to go right to the front like this, and then any excess wire is all going to fold up in there and hopefully stay out of the way. And I can make these all look very nice. Yeah, that's going to work. So that being said, I'm going to get all of the motors bolted up on here, trim and tin all of them first so that wire prep is all done and I can just hammer through and get all that done and not be soldering around my delicate electronics the whole time. I like to tin my motor wires. I like to hold them all kind of flat and in a row. Makes my job slightly easier. With tinned wires, now you can solder the speed control in. You can braid wires, twist wires, whatever. I kind of leave them flat for the sake of the length, and then I can tape them down nice and clean to keep them protected. And then I just solder them in order so they all lay flat, and I change the motor orientation in VL Heli later on. A little easier. Looks terrible. So you do this. Close enough. And then next thing is the XT60. Kind of standing up because it's coming right out the back door. We're getting down to the nitty gritty here, getting ready to plug some stuff in and see if it works. So this guy is going to sit in here. We got a harness that goes on the front that connects our speed control to our flight control, and it's going to be this one. I think it's this one. That guy goes like that, and I like to give it a little sneaker fold. Just so there's not so much harness sticking out. Oh, I forgot the standoffs. The most important part is the standoffs. To stop the damage. One stand up. made my harness way too big. It's a little better. At least it hides the wires that are so gross and nasty looking. Next step is to flash the or the flight control rather. Seems like everybody, you want to get the latest Betaflight in there. So let's go about doing that. So you open up your Betaflight, then you plug in your flight control, that'll switch, and then you go over here to firmware flasher. You check no reboot sequence, you check full chip erase. You want to select the Omnibus F4 SD, and then it'll ask you for the whichever firmware you want. Some people like the older firmwares. I generally try to jump on the hype train of the latest firmware, and it doesn't treat me too bad. And then you click on load firmware online, and that'll download the file into Betaflight somewhere, and then you hit flash firmware, and it should all work. And when that happens, you see this, that just happened, that's bad. We don't want that. So what I'm going to do is unplug the USB from the flight control. I'm going to hold down the bootloader button, and then I'm going to plug the USB back in, and then let go of the bootloader button and try that again. Hit flash firmware, and it works. So you may have to use that bootloader button, you may not. I've done it 6 ways from sideways. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. This time I did. So this guy's our magic bar. It's erasing, and we got one more way through because it's going to say if it did it all successfully or not. If you guys have ever flashed flight controls before, or anything for that matter, I always get a little antsy because it could ruin all of it. But lately, these guys have been working fantastic. And after this, we will go through and talk about all the cool settings inside. It takes some time. You see this progress bar down here moving along, verifying programming successful. And that's all there is to do there. After that, you should be able to hit connect and see your quadcopter. You can confirm orientations and all that stuff there. Alright, so real quick, I'm going to breeze through all the settings that I need to do. So you never want to change this one, otherwise you make it stop working. And as we remember, we connected UART3 to our receiver, so I check the serial there. And for UART6, that is going to be our smart audio for the VTX. And that's way down here on peripherals. You're going to go down here and select TBS Smart Audio. Hit save. And don't forget to hit save. And then got to connect again. So that was our ports. Now we're going to go to configuration. I like to run my motors spinning the other direction, so I do that. You got to go up here, and I'm going to do D-Shot 1200. I don't run motor stop. This I leave alone. I don't have to do any trims here, no accelerometer trims, and I don't run any accelerometer, so this won't matter either. I turn these guys off because none of that is installed, and I also like to run at 8K. I'm not sure if that makes a huge difference or not. Personalization, this is for your OSD, and it's what it's going to say, and I'm going to call this one my MOKE MOKE-1, because this is the frame that Moke made. Camera angle, if you do the FPV camera mix, you can add that in there, and then you got to select your receiver style. So I just set UART3 to serial, and that's what this is going to be assigning that to. For Spectrum stuff, the faster, newer style is 2048, and then none of these get checked. And then let's go down here. I like air mode. I want my OSD on. I got anti-gravity and dynamic filtering. The rest of it, I don't think I use. No channel forwarding, no transponder. D-Shot beacon configuration. This is important so that you can have the switch for your beeper. And leave all these alone. And then I'm gotten down to the bottom. I haven't done anything, or I haven't hit save yet, so I hit save. Go back one more time and connect. Oh, I hit it too soon. So if that ever happens, all you need to do is unplug the USB from the flight control, or from the computer for that matter, plug it back in and watch this guy. Once he changes, you're ready to go again. You hit connect. Power and battery management. For myself, I always turn these down 2 clicks each. just so that my warning stuff is a little bit lower. And then you'll have to come back and set the voltage scale and all this once we get a battery connected, but we'll do that later. PID tuning is the magic numbers. We'll get to this later. We'll come back and revisit this. But for now, I'm going to leave it at default, not change anything. On the receiver side, this drop down needs to be set to whatever radio you use, and then hit save. And then modes, this is all for setting your arming, beeping, all that fun stuff. Motors let you check the motor spinning, and then OSD is where you get to set all the stuff that you want to display. I like to have main battery voltage. I switch over to this so it gets you the normal size screen. I like to have timer 1 in there, just one timer. I do my ARM timer. The craft name, VTX channel, because I do have smart audio installed, so we'll be able to show that. Current draw is always fun. And then the individual cell voltage is the other one that I like. Average cell voltage, rather. All of this, none of that matters. And then at the end, you can check all these. Or these are the warnings, rather. So post-flight, I don't want timer 2. I want timer 1. I don't have anything to show that. I don't have anything to show that. Use milliamps is always fun as well. And then this is my total arm time is what I set for. This way I know how long I've had the copter flying, generally speaking. Sitting around idle doesn't make too much difference. And I like to put my copter name up in the top along with the amps. This way it's not really in your view and you don't have to move your face around the screen or your eyes around the screen too much to look at this stuff. Timer, I move up a little bit so I don't have to look so far. And I like to have my warnings right in the middle. This way if anything does happen, you get a glimpse of it. Sometimes you lose whatever, signals, all that fun information is nice to have around. And let's just tidy this up a bit. Move all these just off the bottom so you don't have to move your eyes so far when you read it. And hit save. So that's the basics of going through all this stuff to get you going so that now we can check it. So let's go back and see what works and what doesn't work. Alright, so there's a couple topics left in Betaflight that we have to deal with. And that is in the, not configuration, where is it? Receiver section. We want to make sure that we have our operation. So I have my receivers already bound and I'm just making sure that all my travel is right. One of the things that you'll find with the radios is these travels are either wrong or they're not enough. And in Betaflight, you want each of these to center at 1500 and go up to 2000 or 1000 or pretty darn close to that in each of the directions. Now, I had already set this up, so I knew that this was going to be okay. And then same for your throttle. Throttle, you want to be at 2000 and 1000 or as close as you can to that for the most part. Sometimes your trims cause that to change. And then we already changed the throttle or the channel mapping, but if you haven't done that yet, you got to do the spectrum here. So we know all these are working and they're in the right range. The copter in the picture moves the right direction. If not, you go into your radio and you change all that stuff. And now here on the modes side, this is where you set your switches and your beepers and all that fun stuff. So go add range, and then the way Betaflight is now, you just flip the switch that you want and then you're good to go. So mine is here, arming down. So up is off, down is on. And then beeper, I run the beeper also, so we get that all the way down here. And then I don't use any of these, angle mix, black box, none of that. Flip over after crash or turtle mode. That's when I put on the same place as my beeper. So that if I'm right side up, my beeper's going, I know my turtle mode's on, and that usually helps everything stay correct. So I just use two switches, beeper and turtle mode, and then my arm switch, and that's all. Now, some people like to do double arm and all that. I found that that's not super necessary for the way that I fly. So you save that, and then you can check everything to make sure it works. Now, Betaflight did an update that if you're plugged into the USB, even when everything's working right, this isn't going to function or spin the motor. So don't worry about that. But if the other ones light up green, then probably you got it right. All right, so we've gotten the copter all checked out. Everything's buttoned up. Everything should be working in Betaflight, and we should be able to do the next step, which is checking motor rotation. Now, you can do that in Betaflight, but I'm going to kill two birds with one stone and check all my radio arming and all that first. So radio's on. Switch is off, plug this guy in, we get beeps, we get the other beeps, and let's see if the beeper works. Motor beeper works, and then arming should spin the motors. There we go, we got motor operation. So I do opposite spinning props, so the stuff doesn't spray on the lens, the props spin outwards. So I just got to check which motors I'm going to need to change in BL Heli. So this one goes inwards, that's outwards, that's inwards, and this is outwards. So this is motor 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I got to change 2 and 3 to the other rotation. And I'll do that in BL Heli. But while we're sitting here, we can turn this off and we can check our video also, make sure all that works. I'm not gonna lie, I already checked this, I know it's gonna work. But there we go, we got video signal. We'll make sure that our smart audio works, that I use the right UART, and that's under features, smart audio. And we can, let's just change the channel real quick. We'll go set, confirm, and it changes the channel. Push the little button back here, where is it? Make sure we're on the right channel. We're gonna go back to our channel, and this is all no antennas on too, by the way. Go set, yes, and back down to race band 2, and so we know our smart audio is functioning. And that's it, basic copter check. After we get the motors going the right way, it'll be ready for a test hover. So if you're not familiar with BL Heli, you can change the rotation of the wires by just swapping 2 wires here, or you can go into BL Heli and do it there. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I have converted to the wonderful world of Macintosh, and my BL Heli configurator is not working, and BL Heli Suite seems to be PC only. So in the time it will take me to figure out how to make all that work, I can switch these wires and be on my merry way when it comes to the quadcoptering. So I'm going to do that. Very, very carefully get in there. And you just have to switch any 2. So I'm going to switch the 2 that are right next to each other to make my job slightly easier. And that should be that. We'll plug it in and check it all one more time. Make sure. Outward, 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 outward. And I'm pretty sure that's it. All we got to do is button it up, put this piece on, find an antenna mount, and we're good to go. There she is, start to finish. That is a flying copter. I think the only thing I have to do is tune it, get some PIDs dialed in. I will most likely put in the same PIDs that I've been flying for years now, the ones that Travis gave me, but I heard that the latest Betaflight, the new filters and whatnot, requires some different settings. So we'll see. I will probably hit up Travis and see if he will give me his tune for this wonderful copter. So Moke's the best because he gives me his tune. I put a antenna mount from a Steez or a what's the other one called? The Brap or the Steez. This is from the Show Me What You Got kits that I had. I tucked the wires from that big mess underneath so they're a little more hidden. I did layer a double-side tape on top of the wires, and then I do some electrical tape on top. This way when the props get bent or there's contact, the wires don't get cut as easily. This is a setup for 4S. These are 2450 kV motors, and this is 1800 4S. These Intellect packs, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I got some packs from Intellect, and they are fantastic. If you haven't checked them out, I'll put a link down in there. They have good sales and stuff on the website all the time. But this was actually all kind of one and done. The flashing of the firmware went into the flight control pretty easy. Had to use the bootloader button. That was cake. And other than that, everything was very straightforward. The harness on the side for the VTX, I kind of like. Once you get it all done, it's easy to plug in and out of there. It's great. HOBBYWING is working on a VTX that'll just plug right into that and have all those cool features as well. But that's all I can think of. I think the only thing I have left to do is add a spacer to the screw so I can tighten up my camera, and this guy will be ready to shred some sky. So thanks for watching, everybody. That is the start to finish building of a 5-inch quadcopter using the XRotor G2 stack. Thanks for watching, everybody.